Since you created a business course, give us 3 tips for a real estate photographer starting right now, that maybe things they should think about on the business side or things that are important.
The number one is know what your images are worth. And that if you don't, that's where photographers get taken advantage of. Number 2, register your photos. I'm so discouraged when I see advice from other photographers going, well, you can still take action if you don't register them. It's like driving your car around without insurance. You can still operate your car. It's just really stupid. Number 3, make your online portfolio for the type of clients that you want to attract. For a real estate photographer, if you want to market to real estate agents, put out real estate type photos. And if you want to get into A&D photography, you have to make that a separate site. You know, you can't act like the Walmart of photography. So if someone wants to transition over into A&D, I highly suggest create a website specifically just for that.
Hey guys, just finished up an interview with Matthew Anderson, a real estate photographer turned architectural and design photographer out of Kansas City. Now, 3 takeaways I got out of this interview is that Matt made close to $100K in 2019 as a solo real estate photographer. He's very passionate about teaching business to photographers, and he also shares the good and bad about architectural photography. I hope you enjoy this interview. Hey guys, Jordan here with Real Estate Photography Hub, and today we're interviewing Matthew Anderson, a real estate photographer turned architectural and design, also known as A&D photographer out of Kansas City. Thank you so much, Matthew, for taking time out of your busy day and joining me for this interview.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you having me on, Jordan.
All right, so we're gonna start with some rapid fire questions so we can get to know you a little bit better. When did you get into real estate photography?
Probably the first listing I ever shot, if I remember right, it was about 2013.
All right, are you currently part-time or full-time?
I'm full-time. I've been full-time as a freelance photographer for, if I'm doing the math right, it's anywhere from 8 to 9 years.
Awesome. And what's been your best year as a real estate photographer?
The best year was probably, it was 2019, yeah, because it was right before COVID. 2019, it was just under 100K. I think it was probably somewhere around low 90s, and real estate at that time was, I'm going to venture to guess, probably 75% of the income for that year.
Awesome. And how long did it take for you to transition to full-time photographer?
Being full-time was thrust upon me by my regular 9-to-5 job at the time. About nine or so years ago, I had done real estate photography as a side hustle, and then I was let go. So I was kind of at a crossroads in life. It's like, do I go back to another 9-to-5, or do I try the real estate photography thing full time and try it out? So it was a transition that was forced upon me a lot sooner than I was planning for.
Sure. And how many repeat customers do you currently service?
I mean, with A&D, since A&D currently is a majority of my business, I just shot yesterday for a brand new interior design firm here in Kansas City, and that was odd because that was a brand new client to me. So I probably have, honestly, about 8 to 12 solid customers that hire me on a repeat basis.
And do you recommend
And I know from a real estate, that's kind of odd.
Yeah. So yeah, you don't necessarily need that many customers to make it a full-time career, and make a great living. Do you recommend jumping in and just starting full-time, or do you recommend somebody that's thinking about getting into real estate photography transition from a side hustle?
From my personal standpoint, I would always advocate for doing it as a side hustle. If you can do it, from an intelligence strategy standpoint, and set money aside, because there will be feast and famine periods, especially in the early stages, if and when you do try to go full time. So if you can make it a transition from part time over to full time eventually, that would be my advice.
All right, so talk to us a little bit about how you got into A&D photography and made that transition from real estate to more focused on architectural and design.
I realized that a few years into shooting real estate that I really did start to appreciate the art and design of residential properties, obviously more on the more affluent, the high end. And as much as I would love to spend 10, sometimes 20, 30 minutes setting up just one shot, you really can't do that a whole lot when shooting real estate. So I personally started to find out that what my approach to shooting these residential properties and what real estate photography was allowing me to do just weren't matching up. And so, yeah, after a while, and I'm a one-man show. I did the shooting, the editing, the scheduling, the accounts payable, accounts receivable, all that stuff. So as rapid fire and as fast paced as real estate photography is, I started to get burnout on it a little bit. And as much as I love somewhat the chaos of life, I like to take my time when it comes to the art and photography and things like that. And real estate didn't nurture that so much, but yet A&D photography did. So in A&D photography, clients typically don't hire you because of how fast you shoot. Interior designers not calling you because they say, "Hey, I heard you can shoot a living room in 5 minutes." That just doesn't happen.
So for that real estate photographer or that person that doesn't necessarily know like transition, I guess just explain to us a little bit about what architectural and design photography is, how it's different from real estate photography,
Sure.
and what like the clients are, right? Because real estate, obviously,
Yeah.
default real estate agents. What does it look like on the A&D side?
Yeah, so I mean, real estate photography, if you're established, you're shooting anything, honestly, when it comes to even commercial, but I focus more on residential. But you could be shooting a small condo downtown, and the next day you're shooting, a $20 million mansion. It's all over the place. But the flip side of that is while you might be shooting this $20 million mansion, you are shooting almost every single square inch of that property, including the amazing parts and including the boring parts of that house. There are boring rooms within a $20 million mansion. So you're shooting every guest bedroom, every Jack and Jill bath, all that stuff. And so, while you would love to, you're really enamored with shooting this beautiful living room and kitchen and, main bedroom and all this. Yeah. You've got to also shoot, these guest bedrooms. So, A&D photography is more when clients are hiring you directly to create images to accurately represent their work. So a custom home builder did this amazing house, and real estate photography is more, I'm painting with a broad brush here, but shooting super wide, stand in the corner and shoot from the four corners. Whereas a custom home builder, they're more concerned about the accurate mood and feel and look, the architectural elements. And so like an interior designer hires you, they're more interested in maybe not necessarily the big gigantic wide shots. They're probably even more than a home builder concerned about the accurate mood, feel, and atmosphere of a space. They're more concerned about the textures and paint colors and just those little details within a space. And yet because you are now representing their work, they are really concerned about how high a quality photos that you're taking for them. They are not concerned about speed, how fast you can shoot. They are more concerned about the end product, honestly. And most of them do not care how long it takes to get the absolute perfect shot.
So let's talk to us about your transition from real estate to A&D full-time. Where did you get those clients and how did that transition look?
Well, I started to find out what clients like that, home builders, interior designers. I kind of looked at it I looked for the low-hanging fruit. Which builders out there don't have great images right now on their website or their social media? And I didn't necessarily go after them because I didn't have the type of portfolio to market to them. At the time, I was marketing myself as a real estate photographer. So whenever I would go into a building or a house or a property, and there, you could tell there was extra effort put into the design or the architecture, or, just a little bit more than your standard cookie cutter house in suburbia, I would try to pry and find out, hey, who did this house? Hey, who did your interior design here? And then while I'm shooting my regular real estate photos, I might spend, unbeknownst to my real estate agent who hired me, spend a little extra time on this portfolio worthy shot of the kitchen or living room, things like that. And then I would take those images and use those as leverage to get in front of the home builder or the interior designer, things like that. So it's a lot of hustling, that's for sure. If you want to transition from real estate to A&D photography, you will never be handed the opportunities on a silver platter. You have to work your tail off to get, just like in real estate. I mean, honestly, because there's a ton of competition. So, and the transition kind of happened naturally. So the more I started to get hired for A&D type work, the less I was available for real estate. So, real estate agents would love for you to have shot their property yesterday. So they,
Right.
by the time they call. And so,
But before you get home, they're calling you on the phone and saying, "Hey, where are my photos at?"
yeah, exactly. I'm like, I'm just not pulling in the driveway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole, the type of clientele that realtors and real estate agents are. That was another reason I got out of it. But anyway, so yeah, the availability turned into, hey, I could get to it in 3 days. Right. I would reluctantly go, okay, we'll make it work. Hey, I can get to it in a week. Okay. And then once you probably get past a week, you're not available anymore. And the phone stops ringing from real estate agents. So I didn't purposely push away real estate clients and real estate photography. It just kind of happened naturally. And the biggest reason was availability. I just was not the most available real estate photographer. Occasionally I'll still get a call and someone will say, hey, when can you come out? And on average, the answer is a month. And that's clearly not the answer they want. So,
all right. So I have the $1 million question now. I have the $1 million question. So how much, what's your average charge for a real estate agent photography shoot? And then how much do you charge and can make shooting A&D?
Big loaded question, but obviously you're looking for numbers. So, I mean, here in Kansas City, like if someone hired me today to shoot a real estate listing, I would charge no less than $300, probably anywhere on the high end, maybe $5 to $6. I think, and in Kansas City, anywhere probably above 500, you're lucky if you can book a shoot like that. But, whereas, and still that's probably shooting 20, 30, 40 plus photos. So it's a lot of shooting. It's a lot of editing. Whereas in A&D photography, most photographers kind of price it somewhat similar to like parts and labor. When you take your car to the mechanic, there's parts and labor. So in A&D photography, there's either a day rate / creative fee, which is what you charge a client just to be there, just to show up on shoot, just for your time. And then there's typically a per image fee. So that way, if someone goes, hey, I want 50 images, you're saying, well, you're going to pay for 50 images. And most of them go, oh, well, then maybe we only need 10. So, and again, you take your time with each one. It is a significantly slower process than real estate. That was a difficult part of the transition for me. I still have to get over it. Real estate's, again, it's really fast paced. And whereas in A&D photography, no one wants you to speed through a shoot. For the most part, they want you to take your time because they want you to produce the highest quality images that you can.
All right. So what's an average? So like you charge $500-$600. What's an average like A&D if they just want 10 images, like a standard your day shoot? You're going out there for one shoot. How much could you potentially generate in revenue?
I mean, day rates just for the time I think if you're an established real estate or A&D photographer, your day rate could vary anywhere. My guess would be on the 500 on the low end to, I know some photographers here in the area, they shoot more commercial, but they're probably charging maybe 3,000 and these are probably, for a full day. So you might be on site for 10 to 12 hours, but just for the time, clients paying you $3,000. And then a per image fee, like on my end, I charge $65 per image.
Wow.
And then I know some client, some pay 150 per image or charge 150 per image. And that's what we charge the clients who are commissioning us. That's not even, I'm not even touching on licensing photos yet, but the caveat to that, the asterisk and the footnote is real estate photographers typically hear those numbers and they go, oh my God, that's amazing. But you might be only doing one shoot a week, maybe two. There's no way A&D photographer is going to shoot 5 days a week. It's just, again, they'd be burnt out. So yeah, because you might be on site for 10 hours, you're not going to want to get up and hop in your car for another shoot like that the very next day.
Right.
So the shoots are spaced apart. So
how did you, so you started as a real estate photographer. How did you acquire the skill set to become an A&D? Was there like courses you take, or was it just like trial and error? Did you learn on YouTube? Like what was your process to becoming a better photographer?
I would guess like a lot of photographers who do what I do now, Mike Kelly's courses on f-stoppers was a huge help. Right when I started in dabbling in real estate photography is about when I think Mike Kelly's first course on f-stoppers came out. And ironically, or I guess oddly enough, as he had course number 2 and course number 3, they were around the times where I was starting to progress. Like I think his course number 3 was about photographing hotels, and that was around the time I actually started taking hotel clients, which was kind of cool. So that matched with the University of YouTube is always a huge help. I mean, honestly, you can type in anything on YouTube and somebody has some sort of tutorial on it, how to do it. How do I use the lighten mode layer in Photoshop? How do I get the perfect flambient look to look natural? Stuff like that.
Right.
And then you just have to cherry pick these things and come up with your own style, honestly. If you want to mimic somebody else's style, you can go in with that goal, but I think after a while, someone's going to, start creating their own style based on stuff you picked up along the way.
Right, and I think that's the beautiful thing about real estate photography. There's so many avenues you can go. You can go the quick, fast, efficient route, charging less. You can go high end. At the end of the day, I think you just got to know who you are and what you're trying to accomplish and what you enjoy doing more, right? Because you found yourself
That's exactly right.
You found yourself frustrated at real estate photo shoots when you're like, dude, this real estate agent's rushing me around this house. He wants me to take 5 minutes or whatever to do all these shoots, but I want to spend a little bit more time. So you just got to find the right clientele, clients, home builders, whatever. If you're an A&D photographer, go spend more time.
You're not going to be the match for everything, that's for sure.
Right.
It's like I can't shoot weddings. I could, but I'm not geared for that, or family photos. So just because someone might not like A&D, I don't know. There are photographers who are cut out for real estate photography, and they are killing it. They're amazing at it. And it's like, I guess the little asterisk I want to point out, because I see a lot of real estate photographers asking this, A&D photography is not the promised land. It's made out to be. It's not. If you are a real estate photographer, you're well established, you're making a good living, and you can see your business growing incrementally, that might be what you're made for. And, if you really have no reason to veer outside of that, outside of a passion, stick with it, man. Just kill it in real estate photography. I wasn't. I left a gap in the Kansas City market. So, that's kind of my editorial on that.
All right, Matt. So talk to us a little bit about, obviously there's pros and cons about any type of photography that you're doing or whatever. So why would you say that A&D isn't necessarily the promised land?
The big part of it, in my opinion, is you have to up your game with your business acumen. And I'm not saying this to I've even made a video on this, not saying this to offend any real estate photographers, but I would say this: if you're a well-established real estate photographer and you've been killing it and you're doing great, real estate photographers have to know that a large portion of their competition is a bunch of just, I've used the word doofuses. I mean, that's, you're competing with doofuses. You know, the barrier for entry is a little bit lower in real estate photography. So, you know, if you're killing in the real estate photography game, sometimes you can probably get frustrated because it seems like every Yahoo with a tripod and a camera is getting into real estate. Will all of them last long? No, they're not. You know, just anyway. So when you get into A&D photography, you have to realize that your established competition, their business acumen, they're all they should be at 100. You know, when it comes to this stuff, you cannot be I don't know how that works when it comes to A&D photography, because your competition does. And if you don't come off like an intelligent, business savvy person, you'll be scooted out of the business, honestly. And again, I'm not saying that to offend people who are in real estate. It's just, I think there's more numbers in real estate photographers, so you have a wider gamut of intelligence in it. You have just probably some of the most business savvy photographers who are running a multi-team business, and they're doing video and Matterport and stills and all this. And then you have some kid just out of college who got a camera and is charging $75 for that $20 million mansion. And you're like, this is who I have to compete against. So, yeah, it's not the promised land, because the pressure's on you for sure. Because now, not only are you dealing with your clients, you're going to be dealing potentially with massive architectural firms. You're going to be dealing with appliance manufacturers, furniture companies, national magazines. So you have to step up your game when it comes to your business acumen, because if you don't, you're going to get taken advantage of.
You know, I like the resources you threw out there, the Mike Kelly courses and stuff. You know, anybody can really I'm sure it just takes a lot of trial and error practice and trying to figure it out. But I really like, you know, creating your own style, you know, at the end of the day.
You have to. I mean, the longer you do it, you have to create your own style. You can't go into it wanting to mimic somebody else's. And I'm saying that because I did. You know, I wanted to copy someone else's style. And then when I would do it, I'd see the end product and go, it just doesn't match the rest of the photos on my site. That's not kind of the quality of the image I want to convey. That might work for them, but that's not me.
So let's talk a little bit more about licensing your photography. You mentioned that before. How do you manage that, and what does that look like?
So since most of your audience is real estate photographers, I would say if you cross the threshold of getting into licensing or dip your toes into those waters, the number one piece of advice I could give someone is do not base licensing in any way, shape, or form off of how you structure your real estate photography prices. It is completely different. I'll give you an example. If for round numbers, if you shot, let's say, 30 photos of a listing for $300, that average, if you did a per image breakdown, that breaks down to about $10 a photo. If another company comes across your photo and says, hey, can we have that one? An inexperienced real estate photographer goes, well, sure, $10, there you go. And they might take that photo and now use it in an ad campaign that they spent $15,000 on. And you gave away basically that main page or that full page ad for $10. You know, that's the thing. So licensing is a completely different beast. It is one of those areas that I'm a huge advocate for any type of photographer in this line of work, real estate, A&D, whatever. You have to educate yourself about licensing. You have to, because if someone's reaching out to you and asking, can we have that photo? They've already revealed their cards. They already see value in that image and they go, we want to use that photo because that would benefit us. And so when you come across and go, well, you can have it for 10 or $20, they basically stole it. and you
Yeah,
gave
they
it
would have
away.
been like, "Oh wow, we were willing to pay a couple grand for that, or whatever whatever the
Yeah,
price tag
exactly. That's
is."
exactly right.
I did want to ask you a question about the Kansas City market because I think that's around like Tornado Alley or whatever. I just wanted to ask about like how you deal with bad weather and stuff like that from a scheduling perspective. You know, what's your take on it? Do you just do sky replacements, or as an A&D, you're like, I need to wait till the weather till how does that look like?
The latter, waiting for the weather, and that's the benefit of shooting A&D. I literally just had something happen this morning, a scheduling conflict because of the weather. So there's a builder here in Kansas City, does these boutique style houses and wants to hire me to. I did one house for him over last summer and loved the photos. Wants to have me to shoot this other house. I scouted it. I drove by, checked it out, and I'm like, oh man, actually 3 p.m. It's going to look beautiful if the sun's coming across, and then twilight. It's going to be amazing. So I said, hey, let's look for a weather day where it's going to be at the most partly cloudy, but a clear sky would be best. And last week I told him, let's try to shoot for either Thursday or Friday of this week. And today is Wednesday. So looking on the forecast, well, Thursday and Friday are terrible. We're going to have rain, possibly snow. So I called him up, or I sent him a text and said, hey, this week's not going to work. Let's look at next week. And they're like, okay, that's fine. So I think sky replacements and stuff like that and photoshopping are great for real estate. It's almost a must have. But if when you have clients spending hundreds or thousands of dollars on their photographer, they would rather it be real. They want you as the photographer to take the time to study the light, the angle, the sun, all that sort of stuff, and get the absolute best natural photo as possible, because there's almost an uncanny valley area when it comes to photography. Sometimes so I've seen like faux twilights, and there's a reason they call it faux twilights, is because it looks faux. So
Hey, we sell those sometimes.
it's
I'm
just
well,
it's like when yeah, and there's clients who
you're
absolutely
right.
love them.
There's shadows.
But,
You're like, hey, where did that shadow come from?
It's like, wow, that the moon is apparently casting a really strong shadow across the front of your house. But yeah, so I find A&D clients are way more than willing to move or bump a shoot because of weather. Sometimes that's even in the contracts, and everyone's understanding. So I always tell people I'd rather push this and give you absolutely amazing photos than shoot something on a completely overcast and bleak day and give you mediocre photos. And I'll tell them, I'm like, you're paying me good money. I want to give you the best photos that I can. And I've never had anybody kick back on that.
All right. So from a photographer standpoint, I did want to ask one question about shooting A&D. I just like, for you, what is the ideal, saying that it makes it the least amount of work in the editing process? Obviously, because if depending on how bright it is outside, what's going on in the property, the lighting, what's like a perfectly set up property for you? Like, oh man, or you walk in, what are those things that you're looking at and you're like, all right, this shoot's gonna make it easier for me than harder. What are those things?
I mean, if you go into a residential property and it's got floor to ceiling windows that are north facing, that's awesome, because you're going to have beautiful soft light just blasting in. When you can have most of the natural window light coming from one direction, that's where you just get that beauty as that light rakes across, the elements within the space. You get those beautiful highlights and shadows, and honestly, and to kind of answer your question too, I get a lot of photographers who watch my YouTube videos, or they'll see my portfolio and go, so, what's your rule on using flash? It's like, well, I use flash if I have to. There's sometimes you walk into a property and the lighting's absolutely perfect. You don't need a thing. Just make sure your composition is nailed. You walk into that perfect property, everything's great. You don't need to do anything to it. You just need to take a great shot. That's it. If I see a house that has light gray, white walls, I know that I can bounce flashes off certain walls to mimic natural light coming from certain directions, things like that. So that's a huge help. The house I shot yesterday had a basement that was probably the most dark and moodiest basement I'd ever shot. Not only were the walls painted or wallpapered black, so was the ceiling.
Oh, wow.
So I was like,
no flash.
I wagged my finger at the interior designer, go, "You didn't make this easy on me, did you?"
All right. So in that, how did you shoot that? Did you just do like low ISO and just longer exposure and just trying to work with that?
For the most part, yeah. So like, for instance, they had a bathroom where they had dark walls and a black ceiling, and the sconces on the side of the mirrors were so bright that no matter what the exposure was, but by the time I got a decent exposure for the sconces, everything else was pitch black. So I'm like, okay, well, I have to raise the rest of the room some way. And some photographers would go, hey, well, I'm just going to blend this together. And you can. It probably would have been fine. But I like to give my photos just a little bit of that borderline surreal look. And so what I did was I put a half CTO gel on a flash, put a 3-foot softbox on it, and then kind of mimicked light coming from the other sconce in the direction towards the other side of the room, and then did it this way. And then what I'll do is I'll blend those together in Photoshop. So I'm kind of exaggerating light coming from each sconce as if it was a softbox, when honestly it's not. But because the direction of the light looks natural, it'll look natural with a touch of surrealism in it.
That's interesting. Now talk to us a little bit about the difference between editing real estate photos and what that takes, and then editing A&D.
From my perspective, editing real estate can be very systematic. I mean, I think there's a lot of computer programs and editors out there who can literally just throw files into a program or send them off to an editor. And, HDR not long ago used to be a bad word. Now it seems like it's coming. The editing's getting better. You're not getting that goofy HDR look. Whereas I would say A&D, it's more fine-tuned. It's more refined. You are literally sometimes editing specific items and pieces of furniture just to make that one item look amazing. And the reason is because the interior designer spent 2 months finding that item, and they really want to show it off. And, that rug was from some market they went down to in Texas, and it cost them $500. Well, they want to show it off. So you really have to shoot right to show off that texture. So I almost liken it to going to a restaurant like an Applebee's versus, if you wanted Italian food, Applebee's does have Italian dishes, and they're decent. They're okay. They're good, according to some people. But if you really wanted just that beautiful artisan Italian type food, you're going to go to an Italian restaurant. And it's going to cost more, and they've spent more time on the recipe. They're not unpackaging some sort of frozen package. They probably made it from scratch that day. So that's the difference. And that kind of circles back to how A&D photography is not the promised land. You will spend sometimes 20 minutes to an hour plus editing one stupid image because it needs to be absolutely perfect. So editing, it's even when you send it to editors, they're going to do the same thing, and they're going to charge accordingly too.
What's your average amount of exposures on an A&D, like one image? What is it like?
I'll still bracket just so I have the information there. That's I'll shoot it roughly about 2 stops over, 1 stop over, right where the camera wants it, 1 stop under and 2 stops under. That's just a carryover habit that I had from shooting real estate, but it's just good to have it in my bed. I just feel, it's my warm blanket just to know I have those exposures. But then like my default kind of stance, if I am going to use flash, is I take the exposure down to roughly where I can throw in flash to make it still look natural. But now I'm controlling more of the light, the color and the quality and things like that. So, that's kind of my go-to. And that's not a hard set rule too. Again, every shot's different. Some shots it's all natural. In some shots, everything is flash. It just depends on the setup and the available light at the time.
Just a nerdy question. What's your go-to flash? Just curious.
I thought I had it with me. My next YouTube video is all about my equipment. No, I don't. It's still in my car. I use Godox. I have a Godox 8400, and then my big boy is a Godox 8600 Pro.
600 Pro. Hey, man. High five.
Yeah.
Hey, there we go. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, and then I carry one of these. This is just literally a basic flash. If it's a small space, I need to pop a flash off of the ceiling. This is so much easier to, shoot into a small room or something rather than those, especially that 8600. Thing's a beast.
Dude.
Shoots out a ton of light.
I put that thing around my neck sometimes. That thing gets heavy after a while. Just
and then you probably visit the chiropractor right after.
Hey, man. More power than not enough is kind of how I like to shoot.
Yeah.
I'm like,
exactly.
And the recycle rate, I know it's going to be good. I can get multiple flashes on a single exposure depending on the shutter speed.
Very true.
Awesome, man. Well, are you going to create an A&D course and talk to us a little bit about what you have going on from teaching? I know you put out some great content on your YouTube channel, and we'll make sure to link to that as well. But I guess talk to us about your 5-year your goals for the next 5 years, as well as content and stuff like that.
Yes, someone asked me that at an event a few months ago, and honestly, aside from growing the business, which is just kind of natural, I want to keep putting myself out there as a resource for photographers. I see a big problem with the business side of photography. There's a lot of photographers jumping into this, thinking that, hey, I know how to take a photo, I can do this as a business. And that's true, but it's like someone who's a good cook and good at baking, thinking they can open a restaurant. It's two completely different things. You can be an amazing cook, but that does not automatically mean you can operate and run a restaurant.
Right.
So the underlying tone of the YouTube channel at this point, and again, it's pretty modest size at this point. It's not huge by any means. It's help with business, but I know that what draws the audience is how to edit a photo, how to shoot this. That's what draws them in. So those get the highest amount of views. But my main goal is to help educate photographers when it comes to the business side. And that's why I'm not sure if you know that I put together a course with Mike Kelly about the business side of architecture and design photography. So that was a little surreal. I put out a video on my channel about copyright, and that opened up a doorway to start working with Mike. And then we got to talking and said, hey, there's this big gap. Everyone eats up his courses about how to take photos, but he would always put little nuggets about the business kind of near the end of his courses. And I said, I think it was his idea. I said, let's come up with something where from kind of soup to nuts, we are given advice and telling stories and tips and stuff on how to run the business side of doing this, because there's not a whole lot out there. There's a ton of how to shoot photos, but how do you turn that into a business, and how do you run that business?
Right.
When you are approached about licensing, when your photos are stolen, they are going to get stolen. You've been in this for a while. Your photos have been stolen. I can guarantee it. You probably have stories with that. And so many photographers, when they come across these scenarios, they go, what do I do? And then and unfortunately on a lot of Facebook groups, some of the advice out there is awful. It's so bad. So that's we put that out there. That's available on apalmanac.com in the store section. And so if you don't want to buy the whole course, you can literally cherry pick different videos. Some just on sales and marketing, some just on licensing, things like that. But yeah, I still want to grow the YouTube channel. I'll still put out a variety of content. I think as the channel grows, I'll start making even more of a variety. I plan on traveling to different places this year to, not only to take photos, but just kind of appreciate and, put that on the video about the architecture and design of specific areas around the world. That's kind of a very high, lofty goal. But I don't know. The other part of me is the channel could turn into something completely different. I have no idea. So I My philosophy is if you plan too much, what you plan in 5 years, it's not going to be that in 5 years. It'll be something else. You never
Right.
know where life is going to take you.
Since you created a business course, give us 3 tips for a real estate photographer starting right now, that maybe things they should think about on the business side or things that are important to them. Just 2 or 3 tips.
Figure the number one is know what your images are worth. You have to know that. And that if you don't, that's where photographers get taken advantage of. Number two, man, this is not priority, but the second piece of advice is copy or register your photos. Register your photos. I'm so discouraged when I see advice from other photographers going, well, you can still take action if you don't register them. That's true. You can, but if you want to pursue anything, any type of legal action, your attorney's still going to ask for you to register your photos. That's like driving your car around without insurance. It's
Right.
just, you can still operate your car. It's just really stupid. Man, number 3 is make your online portfolio for the type of clients that you want to attract. I think I said this on one of my videos that for a real estate photographer, if you want to market to real estate agents, put out real estate type photos. And if you want to get into A&D photography, you have to make that a separate site. You can't act like, you can't act like, like the Walmart of photography. If someone does weddings, if they shoot weddings, they're probably not going to also put, hey, I also do real estate, even if they do. An intelligent photographer is going to make that kind of 2 separate brands. So if someone wants to transition over into A&D, I highly suggest create a website specifically just for that, because then that's the type of clients you're going to attract.
All right, so how important is it to focus on the business side of things and not just the creative side of photography?
It's just, in my opinion, it's almost the 80-20 rule, man, or at the very least 70-30. 70% of, even photographers know this. If you're in real estate photography, what percentage of your day or your week is actually snapping photos? It's so little. The majority of the rest of the time, photographers are emailing, calling, scheduling, chasing invoices, contract, all that stuff. So they may think the photography side is the most important. And while it is important, if you really plotted it out on a piece of paper, so much of your time is the business side of it. And it's almost amazing how much that gets pushed aside, where photographers go, I don't need to know about copyright. I don't need to know about licensing. I don't need to know about improving my website, just that stuff. And it's so infuriating.
All right, Matt, so do you have any horror stories you can share with us on the real estate photography side or the AD side of things?
Oh, of course I do. Yeah, so the first one that comes to mind is I was hired by a remodeling company to photograph kind of an open concept space of a living room and kitchen. And the remodeling company is actually one of my favorite clients to shoot for. We shoot it. I spend half a day photographing just this one space. I get home and the SD card is bad. The files are corrupted somehow. And I sink because I'm scrambling to somehow fix this on my own. I use a Cam Ranger, and I'm hoping that there's a cached images stored on the SD card that's connected to the Cam Ranger. And those are so low quality. It's like, that's not going to work. And so I have to pick up the phone and go, I don't have the photos. If we're gonna have to shoot it again. And we did, and they were perfectly fine with it. I think I gave those to him. I charged him half. I gave him a significant discount. And I think side lesson is there will be mistakes, and I think any business owner knows that the clients are going to make mistakes. It's how you react to them is where people make their judgments. But the other one was on me. It has to do with copyright and licensing. Is for the longest time I just assumed my clients knew as much as I did about it. And so when it was another remodeling company, found out that I had licensed the images to another company, they were furious with me. They were like, how could you do that? And you cannot tell them, well, you're wrong and I'm right, even though you technically are. So I had to navigate that. And then from then on out, being screamed at over the phone is not a good feeling. If anything, that phone call was the catalyst for making my main copyright video on my YouTube channel. So it's a photo of me like doing this or something, and there's copyrights right on the thumbnail. I wrote that as if I was talking to that client. So from
you
then
were
on,
venting, so for an entertaining video.
It was a vent, but the other thing is I know a lot of photographers are not the best speakers. Like, they're artists, so not every artist knows how to communicate real well with other people. So I thought, well, not only will I put that out as a resource for me, but I'll put that there for other photographers, because that video is not talking to photographers. That video is worded in a way to talk to a photographer's client. So it's not condescending, but it's also not, overly mean or stern. It's very straightforward. And it's going, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Client, if you hired a photographer and you have questions about copyright, here's a video explaining it. And I think that's why it's one of the highest viewed channels on my channel, is because it's there as a resource for photographers who go, I'm not the best at explaining it. Here, watch this goofball talk about it for 10 minutes.
Right. That's why there's so many views, right? They just, hey, send this to the customer. No.
Yeah, exactly. And then I made another one. It's a little bit of overlap, but on licensing, that can be a touchy subject with some clients, especially when it comes to they're just not educated about it. Not only the clients, but the photographers too. So again, the licensing video is geared towards talking to, your clients as a photographer, sending it to your real estate agents, sending it to your remodeling companies, your home builders, your architects, things like that.
Yeah, and I think that licensing topic is definitely one that real estate photographers just kind of forget about or don't realize the importance of it, because you're just so busy doing all this other stuff. Oh yeah, you want it $10, here you go. But at the end of the day, you just cost yourself, or somebody not doing things properly can ultimately cost you a lot of money, right? And it's significant.
Well, yeah, especially if you're good. I mean, like I said, if you have a client reaching out to you to say, hey, can we have that photo? They've already revealed their intentions, or they've revealed their cards. They see value in it. So that means they're willing to pay, hopefully. Some people will still ask to use them for free. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, you
want $20
have to know that. Yeah. Here's a good way to think about it. What would that client have to pay if they hired a photographer like me just to go out and take that one photo? Whereas you, as if you're in real estate photography, you have that file there at your disposal to hand to them. You have to also not only factor that in, but factor in the convenience of it too.
Right.
They didn't have to schedule it. There was no skin in the game on their part. I liken it to, buying a gallon of milk at your grocery store that's 5 miles away versus traveling a half mile to the convenience store down the road. There's going to be a markup at the place down in the convenience store because of the convenience. You pay for that. And that's the case with licensing. They didn't have to do anything with it. All they get to do is reap the benefits of that beautiful image. So charge accordingly for it. Definitely don't charge $20. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that's a great thing to think about, right? Like, what all goes into that photo, right? A lot of times you're like, yeah, it's not going to cost me anything. I don't have to reshoot it. I already did all the work. I already charged the customer for it. But put yourself in that customer's shoes. What are they going to have to do to get that photo recreated by somebody? You're going to have to pay a day rate or whatever, all those variables. So,
and it's not just a generic photo of a house. It's a photo of something that they were involved with. So if you go to like Getty Images or any stock photo website and you want to look for a photo of a house to use commercially, you're going to pay a premium for it. The benefit is this is something they were involved with.
Right.
So
they don't want
those are factors you have to take into consideration.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, this has been very, very informational, and that's awesome that you have that business course. And so if somebody's out there looking, they want to see more of the content, how can they find you? I know you're Matthew Anderson on YouTube. How about any other channels? Or
my Instagram is Matthew A Photo. My website is matthewaphoto.com. I link to the YouTube channel on that website, so that's another way to check out the videos. I do, if you are even interested in getting into A&D photography, or even if you're experienced in it, I highly recommend checking out the Business of Architecture Photography course. Mike and I spent 2 solid days recording it. It's kind of like a podcast type setup where, he came out to Kansas City. We recorded it here in the basement, and it's just the knowledge from Mike's side is huge. And him and I are very different. Our clientele is very different. So you have, maybe I would consider myself the lower guy on that totem pole compared to Mike Kelly, but it's 2 different perspectives, from people who I think we do an adequate job, at the very least, of running the business side of it. So I highly recommend checking that out. That's on the store at apalmanac.com.
Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to join me for this interview. I know I got a lot of nuggets. Hopefully those that were listening also as well. So appreciate you taking the time, Matthew, and we'll see you guys on the next one.